Right, okay, so how do we fund our startup? We've gone through the ideas of what makes a good startup, how we do a little bit of research, and how we start to forge our idea. Well, now we're getting to the stage of actually where and how do we fund it. And traditionally, and being from a commercial mindset, there are three main ways. There's a new one, which is really changing the face of how startups are formed. The ones that you'll all be aware of, what's known as equity finance. So this is giving away some of your business, a proportion of your business, for a certain amount of money, known as equity finance. It is what, if you have ever seen Dragon's Den, it is what happens in Dragon's Den. Someone presents and says, I want £30,000 to help launch my business, and I'm going to give you 30% of my business to do so. That is simply equity finance. You can only raise equity finance if you are a limited company. So some of you who might be thinking of being a designer maker, more in the creative side of things, not necessarily going to form a limited company, you cannot raise equity finance unless you are a limited company. So if you are just a sole trader, I say just, if you are going to be a sole trader, going to be freelance, going to be a partnership, you cannot raise equity funds. There are no shares to sell in your business. So that one's straight out. Equity finance. Debt finance, the famous 3 Fs, family, friends and fools to start with. So we can ask for money from our friends, family, anyone that's daft enough to invest in a startup. And there are quite a few. So we can look at the 3 Fs. The other one, which has had a bit of a bad press over the last couple of years, is bank finance. Still debt finance, but finance from banks. So either as a loan, an overdraft, or indeed your credit cards. Common to popular belief, banks are actually giving money away. They are actually lending money. But what they do need is a really, really tight proposition. They're not just going to give money away willy-nilly like they used to. What they want is a very sound proposition. So the stronger your business plan, the more opportunity, the better chance you will get of getting bank funding. If you don't have a business plan, you will not get bank funding, simple as that. Unlike equity, bank and debt funding, most bank loans, for instance, they would expect to see something in return. They would expect to see something called match. So if you turn around and say, I want £10,000 from you as a bank, as an organisation, they would expect you to be stumping up some of that yourself. So if you want 10,000, they would expect to see another 10,000 being brought in from you as a total project, or vice versa with, I don't know, if you need a total of £10,000 investment, they'll want to see 5,000 from you and they'll match it to 5,000 from the bank. They will not generally give you all the money for your project. They will want some form of risk, in inverted commas, from yourselves. And usually that's around 50-50, 60-40 in their favour. Obviously, overdrafts is separate, but overdrafts for businesses are not like domestic bank accounts. They take a while to set up and there is a cost of doing so. So be wary of using overdrafts. Credit cards, as a business advisor, as a consultant, I would say never do it. However, I've seen quite a lot of businesses that have been very successful maxing themselves out on credit cards to get started. Michelle Mone being one of them. Michelle Mone, anyone heard of her? I think she does Dragon's Den 2, The Apprentice 2, she does. She started the Ultimo Bra. She launched Ultimo Bra and was one of the most successful businesswomen in this country. But she did it, maxing out every possible debt finance opportunity. It almost sent her under, but she managed it and she's now one of the biggest successes in this country. Public sector grants, There are a few of those around. In fact, there are 1 or 2 that are available locally in terms of this institution to help you get your business started. So grants is money you don't have to give back. Equity, you're going to have to give something in return, so a percentage of your business and a percentage therefore of the profit. Debt, you're going to have to pay back. Public sector grants, traditionally, you do not have to pay back. So they're really quite a nice opportunity should you be able to get one. They're declining, obviously, as the public sector have less money to spend funding businesses, but they are still available. We can look for them at the university, so some of the work CEO offers provide some small grants. Some of the work the Innovation Centre, and Jade in the corner, I'm bound to pick on you since you're here, they offer a programme that provides a degree of a grant for people looking at starting a business, more around the areas of IP, intellectual property. So there are grants even here. But where do we go for them? Well, you can go to the government grant site. So I don't know the new address, but if you Google Business Link Grant Finder, what you will get, or what you will come to, is a gov.uk site, which is the national government's website now. And what you do is answer a few questions, and what will come out is the public grants or the public support that will be available for your business in your area, because it is a bit of a postcode lottery, unfortunately. But there are some good grants to have, I must admit. I'll be positive. Where I work, mostly in Northamptonshire, businesses can get anywhere up to about £250,000 in grants, depending on what the nature of their business. Most grants actually these days in areas come from the local LEP, so the Local Enterprise Partnership. So in Leicestershire, that is a LEP called LLEP, Leicester and Leicestershire Economic Partnership. So if you Google them, you'll get to their website, and it's actually got a section on their website of funds available or support available for businesses. So they're a good place to start. And then the final one, which is fairly new in terms of business, but again can be really rather useful for new starts. And this is, I personally feel this has changed the complexion of finance for new start businesses. And it's something called crowdfunding. And for those of you who don't know, there are various websites that purport to offer crowdfunding. You as a business put an opportunity out there, and that opportunity might be, I don't know, I need, the great examples are brewers. So there's lots of micro brewers around these days. I need £10,000 to buy a new bit of brewery machinery. I'm not technical in this area. But in return, if you give me £10, I'll give you a bottle of beer. If you give me £50, I'll give you a crate of beer. So they're getting funded, and they're not releasing equity, but all they're doing is sending people a gift in return. And generally those gifts are certainly not worth the money that you're putting in. So you as a business get a better return on that. And it's you and anyone can invest in a crowdfunding project. But it's a great way of getting a new business on a great way of getting new business off the ground. What I want to do though is, before we go into much detail about these different avenues, because different avenues will provide opportunities. It's okay. You okay?
Yeah, the aircon can't take it.
Different avenues will provide different levels of funding, and that's important. Equity finance, you're not really looking at anything below £50,000. And actually, if you go the step beyond at something called venture capital finance, you're looking at £1 million plus. These are far less. So before you travel down a particular funding journey, it's really important to know how much you're going to need. So we want to try and do a bit of accounting, a bit of crunching some numbers, and work out what our startup costs are going to be. What is the money we're actually going to need in order to get us off the ground and going? And in some cases, what do we need it for? Because there are a lot of public sector grants out there that can only be spent on certain things. I'm working on one at the moment, for instance, that's specific for digital, to assist businesses to increase their digital presence. So they won't fund machinery, but what they will fund is IT equipment, websites, whatever that might be. So a lot of grants out there are specific. So we need to know what you need the money for and how much money that's going to be. Traditionally, no funding will cover rent. No funding will cover salary costs. So it's specific items. But it's a good place to start anyway. Why on earth would we start a business without knowing how much it's going to cost us to do? So let's work through it. Business rent, business rates, these are only relevant if you're actually going to go out and start an outlet, rent an office, whatever it might be. And in some cases, rates will be zero. Utilities bills, fairly easy to estimate in terms of your domestic bills. That's going to be your big one, I'm sure, which will be new equipment. So what new equipment are you going to use? What do you need? Do you need insurance? Chances are, if you're starting a business, you will need some sort of insurance at some point. And there are various different insurances to look at. And then we've got the others. So the two big ones I would expect to see, equipment and, for all intents and purposes, marketing. They're the ones that I would look at. The other one, I guess, depending on your business, will be stock. But the more accurate a picture we can get here, the stronger our funding application will be. And actually, technically, the more successful our business will be. Because if we know a little bit about our finances, we're not going to potentially, or we negate the risk or reduce the risk of any financial holes in the future, any hurdles. So first bit of homework, should you choose to accept the task, is you will need to work out what your startup costs will be. Some of that will be easy, some of that you will know already, some of that will take a bit of research. So once we have our costs, we can work out actually which aspects of finance we can look at, which aspects of particularly equity, if equity is the journey we're going to take. So in terms of equity finance, again, remember this is giving away a bit of our business. We have personal equity. So we can take it from the 3 Fs, family, friends and fools. There's no guarantee they're going to get any money back. You don't have to give them a percentage away in terms of personal equity. Parents might just turn around and go, well, okay, we believe in it, here's £5,000, if you're lucky. But they may not want anything back in return. They might just want the money back. But that's going to be traditionally, unless you have very rich family, friends or fools, that's going to be at a lower level. You've got private investors, otherwise known as business angels. And effectively, business angels are your dragons, are the dragon's den that you see in front of you. They are typically individual investors that usually have become successful in business in some way, shape or form, kind of want to step back from the running of their business or have sold it and just want to invest, just want to make a bit of money, but also help out new projects. So to a certain degree, this can be a bit philanthropic. So they will invest for a share of the profits, and that's important. Some will want day-to-day involvement, some won't. So it's always a good idea, if we're looking at private investors, to either get someone that really understands what you're doing or can fill a gap. So in a lot of the Dragon's Den investments that you've seen, is that they go to the Dragons and say, yes, I'll take your offer because I really want your help as well. Clearly, there is something missing in my business or in my skill set that you as a Dragon can offer. And that's what we're really looking for. We're not just looking at the check. We're looking at someone that can really add value to your business and that's going to play a part in developing it. You know, they've got a reason to do so, because the more successful they can make that business, the more successful their investment will be. So there's a reason for them to be doing that. And typically, we're looking somewhere in the region of £50,000 to £250,000 in that sort of range for a private investment. Maybe a little bit less, but that's the sort of range we're looking at. And then we get the really serious stuff, the VCs, the venture capitalists. And these are organisations. In fact, I work for one. I work for a VC company. And what we do, I say we look for opportunities, traditionally in the startup communities of universities, and we throw millions and millions of pounds at it. But for that, we want a lot of share. So there's one example at the moment. We invested in a cancer capture device, cancer capture technology, in a company called Parsortix, which was a spin out of a university. And it was about 6-7 years ago, and we've invested, millions, more like tens of millions at the moment, and we hold a 90% share for that. So whoever had the original idea now only owns 10% of that business. Angle at the moment currently own the rest. So when it comes to making a lot of money out of it, they will only make 10%. Angle will make 90%. Excuse me. So you've got to weigh up, if you're in this sort of area or this sort of area, you've got to weigh up the thought of actually, do I want 100% of potentially nothing, or do I want 70% of something, or in this case, 10% of something? Incidentally, there's the potential for this particular idea to be sold for hundreds of millions of pounds. Potential. Who knows? So VCs are serious. They will want serious investment. They will want usually particular involvement with the company, and they are going to take a large stake of your business. But you will only get to that stage if you are potentially going to make lots and lots and lots of money. There's no point going to a VC business if you're only going to make £5,000 profit a year. They're not going to be interested. So they're looking at really high growth, high potential businesses. They're looking at, okay, they still want potential businesses, but not necessarily as serious. These, it's whoever you can convince to part with their money. They may not want anything back. So where else can we find money? We've talked about Grant Finder, and there it is. Finance and support for your business. If you get started, it will show you roughly. So we can look at, particularly looking at what support we're after. So finance, equity, grants, loans, just advice or an award. We put in our postcode, put in the number of employees and the activity, and out pops a whole bunch of opportunities, from apprenticeships to finance to flexible training, whatever you want it to do. What it doesn't do is provide you with the opportunities to look at more specific and local grants. So it won't pick up the Innovation Centre one here, for instance, or chances are it actually won't pick up a lot of what's around in the LEPs. It only really picks up larger regional programs or larger national programs. This is testing the internet. There we go. So there's a number of grant schemes I was talking to about, funding for businesses, local grant schemes. Don't know what they are. Pop onto the website and see what's there. In Leicestershire, and uniquely to Leicestershire, there are 2 charities that will offer interest-free loans. I stress it's a loan, it needs to be paid back, but it's generally low interest or interest-free. Usually the figures are around £15,000 or £10,000. You have to be under 30, Stacey, I'm looking at you.
I think so, yeah.
I think it's 18 to 30 and outside of education or employment. So you have to be, I guess, a NEET, not in education, employment or training. And you have to be a resident of Leicester for 3 years, 5 years, one of the two. So they do have some stipulations on these grants, but they're certainly worthwhile looking at. And in more cases than not, they actually struggle to give the money away. So they're worthwhile looking at. As I've said, in terms of funding, be aware. Traditionally, any funding application will not pay for any internal costs. So it won't pay for staff salary. It won't pay for staff to train other staff. It won't pay for, some will pay for rent, but it's unlikely, and they're very rare. Most funds, apart from equity, will want a degree of match. And that match varies from, gosh, we're doing one at the moment that only wants 25% match, but there are grants out there that want 90% match. So you've got to provide some money yourselves. There's no point in applying for these grants unless you've got the match behind you. In some cases, you can match one with the other. So if you're successful in one and successful in the other, you can use the income from both to match off against each other. It's your money. Be careful, there are some aspects of that you can't do. In public sector grants, most will require the money to be spent first. So if you're applying for a £5,000 grant and they accept you, you will have to spend the money. You have to have the money in your bank account or have to have access to that money first, and then they will reimburse you with the money. And that's quite an important one. I've been running a grant fund over in Corby for the last year, and it's only £2,500, but it's caught quite a few people out because they don't have that money to start with. We've accepted them, their application, but they've turned it down because they can't afford the £2,500 to start with. So be aware of that one. That's really quite important. And some funds are so specific that you may not be eligible for them. So as I've said, there are some that are specific to digital, or there are some specific to a particular area, geographic area, or there are some that are specific to a particular industry sector. So there are a few out there that are specific to the creative arts, for instance. And if you're in the creative arts and looking for a grant, one of the best places to look at is Creative Leicestershire, an organisation called Creative Leicestershire, because they have access to quite a lot of, or direct access to quite a lot of people at places like the Arts Council. So they do quite well of keeping up with what's going on out there for creatives. The majority, the strong majority, the vast majority will require a very good quality business plan. So I thought, actually, using a bit of experience of where I've been in my career and looking at funding applications, I thought I'd offer a bit of an insight into what goes wrong sometimes with funding applications. So I've put a few common mistakes. The biggest one for me really is that one, touting an untested idea or an uninteresting idea. Don't come to me or don't come to a funding agency with an untested idea. And when I mean untested, I don't mean the fact that you've been out there and used it, or you've been out there, you've already made it and it works and does this and that. I mean doing some research, trying to get a prototype there, or a demonstrable need for a demonstrable market need. That's the biggest hurdle I always see. People saying, I've got this wonderful idea, it's the next thing since sliced bread, but there is no evidence behind it. There is no demonstrable need of the fact that this business will actually be needed, or these products or services will actually be needed. So that's the big one. That's what I would want anyone to focus on in their funding applications. There's things like there's no wow factor. You're just another business doing graphic design, and you're the same as everyone else, and there's no discernible difference between you, and it's actually we're just funding you to do what everyone else is doing already. Why am I going to do that? It's not interesting. There's no wow factor. You must have a reason I should invest. There must be something that would say, I want to invest in you rather than the person that's going to come in next and present the same graphic design proposal to me. What makes you stand out? What is your wow factor? What is your USP, your unique selling proposition? Why would I buy from you rather than everyone else that's out there? What makes you different? The other thing there is a little bit businessy, but what is your sustainable competitive advantage? How are you going to last in business? So when a competitive advantage could be price. I'm going to be lower cost than the next graphic designer that comes through the door. That's not sustainable, because the next graphic designer will just turn around and go, well, okay, well, I'll be lower. And there'll be a race to the bottom. So what we want is something that's sustainable. Something that's going to be really, that's going to last a while and it's going to make you stand out from the crowd. And often that's things like brand. So why do we buy a Starbucks rather than a jar of Nescafe? Starbucks is just a cup of coffee, but the brand makes it the difference. Why do we buy an iPhone instead of just a phone? Well, actually, it's probably just the brand. So can you create a powerful brand that would help you to become, that would help you gain a sustainable competitive advantage? Time. Expecting a 24-hour turnaround. These things don't happen quickly. If anyone that's been involved in the public sector, universities, hospitals, councils, whatever, you'll know that wheels turn fairly slow. So if you're talking about public sector grants, then they certainly will take longer than you think. I think ours is pretty quick, and we turn ours around in 6 weeks. The Harry James Riddleston and Sir Thomas White are usually just quarterly panels, I think. So if you miss it, you're going to have to wait 3 or 4 months. So just be wary of time. Don't expect a quick answer. And equity, well, equity investment, how long's a bit of string, I think, there. It could be really quick as long as the legals are quick, but it could drag on for months, if not years. Avoid assumptions. When we write a business plan, and I'll talk about this next time, we've got to treat it almost like an academic exercise. If we're doing an academic assignment, we wouldn't necessarily put, or we shouldn't put, any bold statement in there that's not referenced, that doesn't have some form of reference to it. And business plans are just the same. We shouldn't put bold financial statements in there or bold assumptions in there that aren't referenced. We need to understand where you've got those figures from. We need to understand where you've got your research from. So please reference it, because that way, whilst you have an assumption, you're making it a safe assumption. So maybe I should change that and put avoid bold assumptions or avoid unreferenced or assumptions. Because otherwise I'm going to be reading your plan, your application, and go, how do they know that? And the first question I'm going to ask when you come to panel, which is often the case, is, how do you know that? Prove to me that these figures are right. And unless you can, you're going to be sat being a quivering wreck like they are in Dragon's Den when they don't know their finances properly. Lack of clear development. This is, again, quite a common one for me, which is actually I'm a designer maker, I'm a hobbyist that wants to turn my hobby into an income, but I need a bit of money to start with. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but how are you going to grow? Why do you need the money? If you need the money to start your business, then what's your growth assumptions? What are your growth objectives? Because if you're not going to grow, I've got no reason to invest. Traditionally, all investment, all funding will want something in return. If it's equity, they'll want a share in the profit, so the profit needs to grow the profit needs to have a development path. Or if it's public sector funding, traditionally we'll look for things like increases in turnover, so increases in the money that the business is making, or increases in jobs created. So unless you're going to show me how you're going to do that, again, it's unlikely your funding application will be successful. And don't just put, I'm going to create 10 jobs in the next 2 years. You're assuming. You've not referenced, you've not provided any evidence, you've not made it demonstrable. What I want to do though is touch specifically on this new form. And this is crowdfunding. There are lots out there. This is Crowdcube. And you'll see the types of things that are there. So games, gaming, holographics, Shave Club. There's an interesting one. There's for those of you who may have seen some of my earlier ones, there's a great case study on Dollar Shave Club. Put that in YouTube, it's fantastic. Coffee, cold brew coffee. Ugh. But you can see they're going to give away, it's 28% funded, they want 100,000, 31 people have done it. So these are the types of projects. So these are, some of them are a lot more serious actually than others I've seen on crowdfunding sites. But what in essence we do is that we take our startup costs, which is why I asked you to work it out, and that becomes the target amount you want to achieve. You then put a certain time frame in, and you can provide, and generally you provide something called benefits in return. So as I said, if you're a brewer, you might give away a case of lager every month, or for every £30 that people put in, you give away a case of lager, whatever that is. You provide a benefit in return. Some will provide equity, some will provide a benefit in return. The downside is that it's all or nothing. As you will have seen from, if I just go back, excuse me. You will see that these are, like I say, 42%, 66% with a certain time frame left. If they don't achieve that other 58%, that's it. You don't get that money. It's all or nothing. So the investors will get that money back. You don't get your project funded. It's as simple as that. It's all or nothing on crowdfunding. Gift aid is a technical tax thing, is possible. There are lots of other things you can do in terms of investment, loans, revenue share, all things like that. So what can you offer in return? What are these benefits in return? Well, things that people want. Like I say, there's I've seen brewers, I've seen bakers, all those sorts of things. And you give people your product in return. It helps actually sell it. Depending on the business, you might be able to offer an experience or an opportunity, or customers. What we try and do is make them clever, is make them a benefit that will be engaging. So, like I say, with the brewer, it's a benefit, actually, if you give them a crate of lager, they're not going to drink it all themselves, so their friends will drink it, and therefore their friends might buy it. So it's giving them almost a free taster. So it's a benefit that will engage the user. Who typically funds? And to me, this is quite an important thing to know. Because if we're not appealing to the people that fund, then people aren't going to give their money away. So if we're not appealing, if the benefits, the rewards you offer do not appeal to the people that fund, you're never going to get your funding off the ground. So you might find the 3 Fs funding you, because they can fund in little bits. And incidentally, crowdfunding is usually things like the entry level is about £10. So if you find a particular project you like, You can all just give them £10, which is where the philanthropically minded come in. So actually some people just like to give money, and instead of giving it away as a charity, they might give it away to a new start business, a business that they actually quite like the sound of. And there'll be those that are looking for a financial return. But then there'll be what's known as the second degree, the friends of the people you know. So it's not just perhaps your parents, but it's the friends of your parents may also do it. So if anyone's done anything for charity and gone round and got sponsorship, well, this is actually pretty much the same thing. So it's not just your dad that might sponsor, but it's all your dad's colleagues that get roped in to sponsor you. And it's the same thing with this. With crowdfunding, you don't get the chance to pitch in front of anyone. It's not like Dragon's Den. Usually there is no visual pitch. There is nothing about standing up in a room and presenting your idea. So if you're quite powerful in terms of presentation, crowdfunding is going to go slightly against you. You need to potentially create a very short story that's a hard sell. You need to have a very powerful proposition in 2 or 3 paragraphs. Some will offer you the chance to create a short video about your product, about your business. This is not you standing in front of people and pitching why they should invest. This is a short video about the actual product or the service you plan to offer. With everything, and I guess this is quite actually apparent in life, no one wants to see anything that's not started. No one wants to be the first person. I hate going into an empty restaurant. I won't go in unless there's people in there already. Likewise, you get that with funding. So there are always people that are reluctant to be the first investor. So when you put your project on crowdfunding, on a crowdfunding site, try and have some investors lined up already that will instantly press the button for you. So all of a sudden you're not at zero. Because if you're at zero and it's gone to the wider public, it's not as appealing. Little other tricks, don't have a long lead time. Some of those we saw as 60 odd days. I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. I prefer a nice short time scale that allows you to keep momentum. Because don't just think by putting your project on a crowdfunding site that that's all you need to do. I'm just going to sit back, sit on the sofa, drink beer, and let people invest in my business. That's not what you can do. That's never going to help you. You've got to be proactive with it in the same way that, like I say, if you do charity run or whatever, you're very proactive in seeking sponsorship. You've got to be proactive in seeking sponsorship for your business. So compress the timescale. Don't keep it just mulling over. Try and keep the momentum going. Try and keep the enthusiasm and the passion about your idea and about your funding proposal going. And it's easier to do that over a shorter timescale than a longer timescale. And kind of following that, do something every day on it. Like I say, don't just sit on the sofa and drink beer. Actually go about, talk to people, ask people, show people, tweet, use social media to your power. Put it on Facebook, whatever it is. Do something every day to try and achieve that funding goal. By just putting it on a crowdfunding website is not going to help. You need to be proactive as well. Try and rope your friends in. There's nothing better than finding advocates for your role. Turn pledges into cash and likes into supporters. Ask people to give again. The chances are you will know who these people are. You will get their details. So there is nothing wrong with asking them to give again. If they've already given £10, ask them for another £10. Gosh, I donate to charity little bits, but I constantly get asked by that charity to donate more. I don't mind them asking. I don't necessarily give, but I don't mind them asking. Because actually it's easier to ask me, who is already a supporter of the charity, than it is for them to find other people. Get publicity. like I say, use social media to your benefit. If you can, and it's something genuinely interesting, try and utilise PR, try and utilise the press in all of this to try and get your case wider, make it more aware, make people more aware of it. And actually, there's nothing wrong with trying to get a few people around and actually physically get them in a room, show them the product, show them the prototype, give them a presentation, then give them a link to your crowdfunding site. Come on, empty your pockets. You're not leaving a room until you've donated on my site. See if you can find someone to put up match funding. So this is actually, you know, if I get £5,000 through lots of other people, will you stump up 5,000 in return? You might think that's daft, but it's not. People will invest in a business that people are interested in, that people are going to support. Support breeds support. So you might find someone that's wavering about your business, potentially a more private investor, that'll turn around and say, I'm not sure. If you can then go to them and say, actually, I've got it up on Crowdfunder, and I've already raised 10 grand, and I've raised it in 2 days. This is your chance to get in at the ground level. 10 grand now, job done, you get the majority. So you can actually, you can use it to your strength in getting other people to fund as well. Set yourself challenges. Set yourself achievable, smart objectives. I want to reach 25% of my target within 2 weeks by talking to X, Y, and Z. An open target is something that is a lot more difficult to achieve than something that's been narrowed down. And just finally then, some final tips just to round up. Be consistent, be clear. If we're going to put in a funding application and we're using hugely technical language, try and explain it. Generally, funders will be people with too much money that won't understand necessarily the technical detail about your product or your idea. So dumb it down a little bit so they understand it. If you're using acronyms, explain them. Please, I live in a world of acronyms and I kind of hate it when people introduce new ones that I don't understand. So be clear. Be consistent. There is one word that I will ask you to take away from the business planning session, and that is simply consistency. Don't pitch to me an idea that you're saying is high quality, it's bespoke, it's handmade, and then pitch it at a low value. It doesn't make any sense to me. Be consistent about everything that you do. In fact, if there's one word I want you to remember in terms of starting a business, is be consistent with your approach. Be concise. I've read and continue to read applications for £2,500 that have used 2,500 pages of paper. And that is no joke. Sometimes I judge these applications by centimetres, not by the numbers of pages. And I hate it. I haven't got the time to read through reams and reams of paper. I want something to be concise. If you're going to say, how long should how many pages should it be? I can't give you that answer. What I don't want is waffle. Be pithy, get straight to the point. Be realistic, check your assumptions. And if you are making assumptions, make sure they're referenced and make sure they're realistic and relevant. Understand what the objectives are. I've mentioned to a certain degree that when you're involved in a public sector grant, a university grant or a council grant, whatever it might be, their objectives will be to create new jobs. Their objectives will be to help business growth. And business growth is traditionally measured with things like increase in turnover. So be aware of their objectives and write your application in accordance with their objectives. Same with the private sector. They want to know you can pay back the money. So if you're writing for a bank loan, they want to be sure that you're going to be able to pay it back. They want to be sure that the business is strong enough, or the potential is strong enough for you to pay it back. What they don't want is for you to default. And actually, if it's equity, generally, they will want to make some profit. That's all they're after. They're after hard profit. So be aware of what the objectives are. Follow the guidance notes. Gosh, our grant is so basic. We ask for an application form to be filled out and a brief business plan. More often than not, we don't get both documents. Read the instructions, for crying out loud. It helps. It helps no end if you just read the guidance. Please be aware of things like word counts, because some applications will have a word count to it and don't go over. Some applications will want certain things in certain ways. So please read the guidance notes. And that's pretty much it for me today.